Hello, and welcome to the Module 5 commentary video, Managing Active Paper Records for LIS 886. Please take a moment to adjust your video and sound settings for optimal video viewing quality. If you encounter any difficulties viewing this video, please contact me as soon as possible. Prior to viewing this video for Module 5, please read pages 177 to 208 in the Safety textbook. Also, please read the handout on Canvas called RM, Tackling the Volume and Persistence of Paper by Phil Britt. Directions on where to locate the handout will be available in your Module 5 to-do list, which is also posted on Canvas. This week, we will spend our time discussing paper. Lots and lots of discussion about paper. Could it be any more exciting? As a 21st century RIM program manager, you will obviously need to keep abreast of all the cool technology solutions which will help you effectively manage records. However, as an homage to the 20th century and the backlog of paper records which were created during that decade, we must also discuss how to organize and effectively manage paper records. Bottom line, paper isn't going away anytime soon, and to avoid having a hot mess in your filing cabinets, I'm going to provide you with some simple tricks and tips to manage the paper until it disappears to the Smithsonian where it belongs. Before we dive in, let's take a moment to recall two important RIM theories. First, recall and etch into your long-term memory the life cycle of a record. The life cycle of a record describes the natural progression of a record throughout its time in an organization. Remember, these 5 phases are key to understanding the natural progression of a record over its lifetime. When we speak of managing active paper records, we will spend a majority of our time discussing the maintenance phase. However, you will find that effective management of paper records actually should begin in the creation phase and then sort of cycle throughout. Okay, so it's important to remember that paper really can impact any of these stages. Speaking of active records, Safety does a great job of calling out the difference between active and inactive records. Remember, when we speak of active records, consider those documents or files that you reference on a frequent basis and know that's what we're discussing here. These are the files of active patients, active students, active clients, and different things like that. You fill in the blank with your line of work. If you're going into folders on a regular basis, like once a week for example, you're looking at an active record. You will find the word active is somewhat of a moving target because there's no particular time frame attached to the definition. However, the file would be considered inactive if you haven't, for example, looked in the folder for several months or maybe even a year. These files are hardly referenced and you're only really holding on to them because the records retention schedule says you need to keep them for a while before you can ditch them. Active records should be stored in close proximity to workers because it would be very annoying to have to dig around in a warehouse multiple times a week to try to find information. However, if you're only looking at a file once a year or so, box those bad boys up and ship them off to an off-storage vendor, which we'll talk about how to pick one in the future, or some other remote storage location so you can make room and keep only your active files. Just remember, the more space you take up with files, the more expensive it is for your firm. So try to remember that as you're thinking about how to organize items. Also, as a review, remember, as time drags out, the reference activity of a file gradually drops off. This model, in addition to the life cycle of a record, are great theories to commit to memory for your work here in records and information management. That never gets old to me. Alright, moving on. Safety makes reference to filing versus indexing, and I want to take a few minutes to discuss the difference. With filing, items are organized by those records to which they relate. So, you'd logically file together medical information for a patient, documents for a collection, or grades for a student. Indexing, on the other hand, uses descriptive words or phrases to create relationships. Used frequently in electronic document records management, indexing items are not necessarily found in close proximity to each other. Both ways to organize records are valid, and these two concepts are very key and have distinctions which are worth noting. So again, make sure you know the difference between filing and indexing. While similar in nature, they do have some very different key qualities. Again, just to talk about active and inactive records, just remember, active records are things you're looking at constantly, inactive records are things that you're not. So important, again, I wanted to drive it in for you. All right, to best manage active paper records, you should deploy a filing system, also known as a filing plan. A filing system, by definition, is a coherent methodical approach to organization of records in a specific application or situation. In layman's terms, a filing system is a game plan for how records will be organized and with what equipment and people you will use. As you can see, the text states several requirements to include in a filing system, including people, equipment, and space. A filing plan is no small undertaking, as we will discuss shortly, and should be thought out carefully to select and deploy the system which best manages your paper records. The text also makes mention of central filing as a viable solution for the management of active paper files. If you've ever seen or pictured a massive room with shelves upon shelves of records in an office environment, you're probably correctly picturing a central filing unit. In order to keep records secure, uniform, and organized, law firms, government agencies, and other agencies like that will typically deploy a single space where files are stored. Not only is this system economical and efficient, it also cuts down on the number of duplicate files, in theory, roaming around an organization. With the advent of sophisticated electronic document management systems and network drives, central filing rooms are become somewhat extinct. While a great idea in theory and helpful in the past, you will find less and less of these entities as we move forward in the field of RIM, especially as we start talking about electronic records management. The bottom line is you're going to see them, they're not going away, but you'll see them less and less, and even some organizations don't even ascribe to the theory of central filing because it's just impossible to have people come into a central unit to get the files. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's pause for a moment and talk about how you can go about arranging active paper files. Obviously, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for anything in RIM, which means you'll need to explore the various options when it comes to filing arrangements. However, the text, ARMA, and a whole host of other professionals have narrowed down the options to a few filing arrangements, which seem to best fit some of the common scenarios which you'll see across industries. So, why don't we check them out, shall we? And just as a sidebar, the text does a great job of describing some of the more common filing arrangements, but do know there are textbooks upon textbooks about how to do them. In fact, you'll find simply like a single textbook for alphabetical filing or numerical filing. There's so many nuances. I am not going to belabor those points and bore you. If you're really interested in them, by all means, go out and grab the books. Just know that there's a lot of thought put behind some of these systems. So much so that you can write a textbook on it. Alright, the text lists the numerous options on how to file active paper records. In an attempt to give you a realistic sense of what a RIM manager confronts in the 21st century, I'll stick my commentary to the first two types, alphabetic and numeric. Now please note, other filing arrangements are just as valid, however you will not realistically come across these types in most organizations. In fact, I was talking to my colleague here at DePaul, and some of these systems we couldn't even remember or try to even figure out, and we passed the national certification for records management. So just know, some of them are really nice, but really some of these are kind of obsolete. Obviously, there are exceptions seen all over the real world, but just know that alphabetical and numeric are the most common. However, be sure to at least understand the sentiment behind some of the other ones listed in the text on the off chance you confront them when you go off to be a records manager. Let's start with one of the most common types of filing systems. That would be alphabetic. As seen in the graphic on the screen, the files are organized from A to Z with a file for each patient, company, vendor, or so on. When advising an organization or a program unit on how to organize files, experts typically recommend to arrange the records in the manner in which they're requested. So, if you're a medical office or maybe an organization's human resource department, you're probably going to arrange the files by patient or employee. Keep in mind, in some instances, it might be disadvantageous to have the person's name on the file. For example, if you work in a mental health setting, is it prudent, confidential even for that matter, to have the names of the patients seeking treatment clearly written on the file in plain sight, as you do see in some doctor's offices still? While somewhat a fringe example, privacy is just one of the many concerns you'll want to consider in recommending a file plan, and some of the other ones are listed in the text. So make sure you're just at least keeping those in the back of your mind as you're starting to advise program units on how to arrange their paper records. Another option you can explore in active paper records management is numeric filing. In numeric filing, each client, patient, or case is assigned the next number in sequence and filed as such. As an advantage, it's very clear on how to file the items since numbers do not have special case scenarios like having a MIC or a last name hyphenation. Also, numeric filing systems increase security in that it's not so obvious as to whom the file belongs as it would be when it's alphabetical by name. However, filing by number can cause bottlenecks in the office because the most active frequent reference files will probably be clustered together, and it might cause a jam around a particularly area of the filing cabinet where everyone's going to be huddling. Also, a phenomenon called backshifting can occur. This happens when old files must be moved or shifted around to make new room for files. In the grand scheme of things, it's definitely a RIM first world problem, as they would say, but nonetheless, it's worth noting as just one of the drawbacks of numerical filing. If you, like me, love a good trip to OfficeMax, this next section is for you. Again, Safety goes into depth about filing cabinets, file folders, and labels. Yes, even labels. Now, as graduate students, I think some of the topics covered in this section on filing equipment are obvious/child's play. Nonetheless, be sure to read up on some of the specifics relating to filing equipment. As we conclude this commentary, however, let me briefly just discuss filing cabinets and what they can offer to you. One of the most common types of filing cabinets you will encounter in an organization is the vertical filing cabinet. You will find these gems in the 2 to 5 drawer varieties, and they typically can hold between 2,000 and 3,000 pages. In the world of electronic records management, these babies are becoming food drawers and junk bins quite quickly, but you'll still find them in use in some organizations, particularly those that are strapped for cash. An example of a vertical filing cabinet is seen on a screen in front of you. The other common type of filing cabinet found in most organizations with active paper records is the lateral filing cabinet. In a lateral filing cabinet, the key thing to remember is that width exceeds depth. As seen on the screen, lateral filing cabinets can hold from about 2,000 to 4,000 papers and can come in all different varieties to suit your needs. Before we conclude, let me give you 3 suggestions to remember in dealing with active paper records and filing equipment. First, think about imaging the files. If it's humanly possible to convert the paper files to digital, do it. For various and sundry reasons, it's just the best way to go about this long term, unless rules or laws dictate you cannot go that route. Also, talk to the folks who manage your facility operations at your organization. Recently, I worked with a program unit who moved into a new office space and undertook a massive file imaging project before they moved. They simply just didn't want to bring the paper with them. When they arrived in the new space to inspect it, however, they found that the facilities operation folks ordered the same amount of new filing cabinets as they had in the old space, assuming they were going to have the same amount of files. However, they no longer needed about 80% of the filing cabinets. So now, those filing cabinets are being used as room dividers. They sit empty, and they occupy precious office space, which could be turned into more cubicles, more desks, different things like that. So be sure to keep in touch with your facilities folks and let them know about what sorts of projects you're working on. Finally, if you're in the need to order filing cabinets or filing supplies, find a good vendor. A lot of times your company will tell you that you have to go through a certain company, like Staples or OfficeMax or CDW or something like that. However, if you're on your own, just know that the company, for example, Tab Products, is a great firm that manages in active record organization and is a fabulous resource. Just know there are plenty of other companies out there, Tab just being one. I don't endorse anyone in particular, but just know that you have lots of options. This concludes the Module 5 commentary video on managing active paper records. I hope you enjoyed our little journey through paper and did not receive any paper cuts. See, that's a fun records and information management pun that I just threw out there. I hope that at least got a low groan or a chuckle from some of you. As always, if you have any questions or would like further information on some of the elements related to the commentary or the discussion that we have from the book, please contact me directly and I'll be happy to help. Talk to you in the next module.